Okay. So that woke me up more than the coffee did. Um, okay, so few people coming into this session. So um, just to review a little bit, in our first session of the day, we talked a little bit about, well, Lamrim. And to get into that, we talked about the life story of the Buddha, how the Buddha's teachings sort of spread into different traditions, and then also talking about the different tenet systems that arose, and then going through the kind of four main root outlines, talking about the greatness of the author of the Lamrim in order to generate respect for the teachings, the greatness of the teachings themselves, and then how to listen to and engage in the teachings, right? So now we can go to slide 15. So after those kind of preliminaries, we then have the sequence in which the disciples are taught actual instructions. So those of you who been studying Lamrim, you'll know that in the Lamrim Chenmo, then actually before this, there's the big topic on how to devote yourself to a spiritual guide. We also mentioned before the break, in some of the other traditions, they have something akin to Lamrim. And I mentioned the text, Jewel Ornament of Liberation by Gampopa. So in that text, actually the how to devote yourself to a spiritual guide is found after the teachings on samsara and nirvana, right? So in any case, after that is then these outlines. So the stimulus to take the essence from your optimal human rebirth, and then how to extract the essence from your optimal human rebirth. So already last night at the end of our motivation, or maybe this was the entire motivation, but talking about those inner and outer conditions that we need to awaken our Buddha nature, our potential to achieve enlightenment. So that first bullet point here, the stimulus to take the essence of your optimal human rebirth, is all about that. So identifying all of these inner and outer conditions that we need to practice, and then talking about the sort of a rarity of having such an opportunity, as well as the great benefit we can take if we use our time, if we use our lives wisely, right? And so thinking about those teachings in a very deep way, we then are sort of motivated, right, to make sure we use our time in the best way. So then, how to extract the essence from your optimal human rebirth, that forms the rest of the Lamrim. And so, although we were saying, right, Lam, path, Rim, stages, right? So in general, it's going to be laying out the stages of the path to enlightenment. But even within that, they kind of categorize the teachings into what they call three scopes, or three types of practitioner. The kebu sum, right? The three, kebu is like a person. So it's the three types of person, okay? So then, but yeah, in the translation of the Liberation of the Palm of Your Hand, they talk about scopes, okay? Anyway, this is talking about three people. So next slide. How are these three people differentiated? But they're differentiated by their goals. And therefore, since they have different goals, they need different methods to attain those goals. Okay. So here, there's the Kebu Chungu, kibudring, and kibuchenmo, right? So the person of small capacity, medium capacity, or great capacity, okay? And so they all have different goals, and therefore they need different methods to attain those goals, right? So the person of small capacity, their goal is to attain a good rebirth in the next life. So how do you do that? Well, you have to abandon the causes of bad rebirth, non-virtue. And you also have to practice virtue, the cause of a good rebirth. Then the being of medium capacity, right? They want liberation from all of samsaric existence. Okay. So here, samsara, you maybe heard this term. Yeah. Cyclic existence, they sometimes translate it as, right? So, cycle. If we want to get a little bit more precise about the definition, we can think of it as this process of uncontrolled rebirth. Means we don't choose where and when and how we're reborn, but we're sort of projected into our next rebirth, propelled, thrown maybe into our next rebirth due to our karma and our afflictions, our disturbing emotions. Okay. And then the person of great capacity. So if samsara is this process of uncontrolled rebirth thrown by karma and afflictions, then to be free of samsara, we have to get rid of karma and afflictions. Yeah. Then the person of great capacity, their main goal is the full enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Right. So here we differentiate between the attainment of sort of mere nirvana or liberation from samsara and the attainment of full enlightenment. Yeah. The attainment of mere nirvana is coming with the abandonment of the afflictions, but that still doesn't make you an omniscient Buddha. Okay. So sometimes you'll hear this kind of the distinguishing between three things, right? So we have the kind of manifest gross afflictions. These will be the minds of anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, whatever. And then you'll sometimes see the seeds of the afflictions. Okay. So right now, for me at least, right? Thank goodness I'm not angry right now, right? So there's no manifest anger in my mind, but there's a potential for me to get angry again if I meet with certain factors, right? So the potential for anger to arise again in my mental continuum is what they will call the seeds of anger. So those who have achieved the state of nirvana or mere liberation from samsara, they've abandoned the gross afflictions and the seeds of the afflictions. It means it's impossible for them to get angry again in the future, no matter what kind of external circumstances they find themselves in. So that's great, but there's something even more subtle than the seeds of the afflictions, and these are what they call the imprints, the bakchak in Tibetan. So here, the analogy that's often used is, if you had a Tupperware container, yeah, and you put onions and garlic, and then you put it out in the sun, right? Let it, bake a bit. Then after, when you open up the container, even you throw out the onions and garlic, there'll be some smell left over, right? So the the bakchak, the imprints are very, very subtle like that. Since, again, in the Buddhist cosmology, then the mind is beginningless. And it wasn't that, we first were somehow liberated, we were enlightened, and then somehow the afflictions came, or like, someone planted the afflictions or like cursed us. But beginningless mind, beginningless rebirth, beginningless afflictions. It's always been that way. So because of the habituation, it's like the Tupperware container of our mind has had the onion and garlic of the afflictions from beginningless time baking in the sun. So even when we get rid of them, there's going to be that imprint left over. And those imprints, very, very, very subtle, is the effect it has on us is that then we're not able to perceive all phenomena directly with one mind in one moment. Means those are sometimes referred to, right? We have the obscurations to liberation. Those are the afflictions and their seeds. And then the obscurations to omniscience are these subtle imprints. Okay? So whereas the main kind of, they call it the object of abandonment, the main thing that the person wanting mere liberation from samsara, what they want to abandon then is the afflictions and their seeds. But the main object of abandonment of someone on the Mahayana or the person of great capacity are the subtle imprints. Now, in order to abandon the subtle imprints, you need to also abandon the gross afflictions. But yeah, it's not the primary goal. And it is said that even some people on the path, right? You can transform even the afflictions such that they're not. It's like poison that the antidote has been applied, and then it loses its potential to harm, right? Okay, so those are three types of person. Okay, in the main kind of subject matter we'll be going through is then the practices of person of medium capacity. But since we have some people of different levels, I thought we could just go a little bit quickly through the practice of a small capacity. But before we do that, let's just go to the next slide. And again, remember, showing that the teachings come from an immaculate source. So these three levels of practitioner, then these two great Indian masters, they say this. So Arya Nagarjuna says in the Ratnavali or Precious Garland, initially there are the teachings on high status, then come the teachings on certain goodness. For having obtained high status, you gradually reach certain goodness. So here, high status means a good rebirth, right? Then certain goodness, ngelek, that means either liberation from samsara or enlightenment. Okay, because as we'll see soon enough, those are the states beyond samsara. And while we're still in samsara, where we still have this uncontrolled rebirth, then there's no certainty, right? We might be, top of the world today, but since we're still in the power of our karma and afflictions, well, the good karma that projected us into this good state today is going to run out, right? So only when we achieve the state of liberation are we kind of certain that we won't suffer again. Okay. But as we said, in order to achieve this liberation or a full enlightenment, we need to have particularly this human body with the intelligence that can put the teachings into practice, understand what we need to do, abandon what needs to be abandoned, and so forth. So therefore, right, mm, the kind of first practice we must do is to get rid of our kind of negative actions, and so we can have a string of good rebirths in the future for as long as it takes, that we can continue to make make progress with our practice. Then we have Aryadeva saying, initially you stop the non-meritorious, in the middle you stop the misconception of the self, finally you put an end to all bad views, one who knows this is learned. So yeah, same thing. In the beginning, we have to stop the causes of bad rebirth. And then since all the afflictions, they're actually rooted in the misconception of ourselves, how we exist, then the main practice of someone in the middle scope, person of medium capacity, is to stop the misconception of the self. Then putting it into all bad views, right? That's the Buddha. Only the Buddha is omniscient. Everyone else has some, although they may no longer be mistaken about the self and how we exist, the kind of subtle workings of karma, which is needed to understand what teaching to give to each disciple, that is the kind of exclusive purview of the Buddhas. Okay. So then, next slide. Here, the actual, how they talk about in the small scope, we develop a yearning for a good rebirth, and then we teach the means for happiness in your next rebirth. So then, develop a yearning for a good rebirth. We do that by recalling that a present rebirth will not last long and that you will die, and then thinking about what kind of happiness or suffering you will have in your next rebirth in either type of two migrations. And then after thinking about that, then the actual means for attaining the happiness in your next rebirth is to take refuge. So, yeah, even in a kind of worldly sense, we take refuge all the time. So one thing is, when it rains, right, we go under some kind of shelter, right? That's taking refuge. So in general, what's needed to take refuge is we see something undesirable that we don't want to experience. We see something out there that can give us some level of protection against that. And then we go under the roof, right? So similarly, when we take refuge now in the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, well, we have something that we don't want to experience. And that can be, actually, we talked about these three scopes. So each of those scope of practitioner can go to the three jewels of refuge for their own sort of goals and needs, right? So someone not wanting rebirth in the lower realms, then they go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and then, follow the teachings on karma, cause and effect. Someone not wanting to take rebirth in samsara anymore, then they go for refuge to the three jewels for that purpose, and then they follow the teachings on analyzing how the self exists and abandon the afflictions, right? Anyway, here, since this is in the small scope, then the emphasis is on, the second point, developing believing faith in the law of cause and effect, the root of all health and happiness, means the teachings on karma, and then abandoning the non-virtue. So this was the exact wording from the Lamrim text. But if we just to kind of summarize the actual practices, next slide. The practices of a person of small capacity are the teachings on impermanence and death, reflecting on the suffering of lower realms, taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and reflecting on karma, and therefore modifying one's behavior to be more in accord with the teachings on cause and effect. Okay. So next slide, we had we talked about Atisha Dipankara, who wrote the Lamp to the Path to Enlightenment. So in that text, he says, know to be least those persons who diligently strive to attain solely the joys of psychic existence by any means for their welfare alone. Okay. So actually, then in the Lamrim Chenmo, they talk about even this, the attitude of person of small capacity gets divided into two, right? So a completely like worldly being who's only thinking about this life, they're actually person of small capacity also. But then there's a kind of little bit better than that, thinking about the joys of psychic existence in their next life. That's a kind of distinguished person of small capacity. And in Lamrim Chenmo, that's the one they sort of emphasize. And so, next slide. This is from the Lamrim Chenmo. So this kind of distinguished person of small capacity, right? How do we know that we've even reached that state? So here Lama Tsongkhapa says, previously you had uncontrived interest in this life, while your interest in future lives has merely been an understanding that follows what others say, right? So we know uncontrived, right? Coming naturally, right? So all the happiness of this life, yeah, very easy. We don't need convincing to, eat, eat delicious food or, have nice experiences, right? And even when we start to come into the Buddhist teachings, yeah, our teachers, they try to really hammer in that future lives are more important than the current life. But it's kind of like, yeah, right? So now we have generated the attitude of a person of small capacity when these interests change places, and your interest in the future has become paramount, while your interest in this life has become merely incidental. Hmm? Are we like that? Huh? So, sorry, you might be. I'm not, right? See, these are good reality checks, right? Because this happens a lot. Of course, maybe not with you guys, but even you come into the teachings and you hear this three types of beings: small capacity, middle capacity, great capacity. Then people are like, I'm a great capacity. You know, give me the good stuff, right? Don't. What is this small capacity, right? This reminds me. I moved to India in 2005. At that point, I was still a layperson. I was living in Dharamsala, and I had the good fortune to study down at the Tibetan library, the Lamrim Chenmo, like 9-month course, right? But some of you will know if you've looked at Lamrim Chenmo, even at the beginning, um, Lama Tsongkhapa is talking about the need for good motivation, and therefore, um, you know, we're doing this for all sentient beings and try to generate the mind of bodhicitta, this wish to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, sort of even at the beginning. And so in one of the first lectures, or like, I don't know, maybe first week, we had the opportunity to ask the teacher, Amchok Rinpoche, questions. And then I saw, bodhicitta being referred to. And so I asked him, how do you develop bodhicitta? We're on page, I don't know, maybe 30 of the text. So I remember very vividly. So he had the Tibetan text, right? It's not bound. It's just a stack, like a block of pages. Anyway, he kind of goes through. So you can imagine if the text were like this, kind of goes through like this. Anyway, so he goes like this, and he's like, so the teachings on bodhicitta, they start here, right? We have to go through all this before we get into the teaching on bodhicitta. So of course, I'm like, come on, come on. You know, on page whatever 20, the word bodhicitta is mentioned. I thought it's fair game to ask, right? Of course, I think that. And this is true. It was fair game to ask, but I think the import, and later when I reflected on it, is just this thought, right? That although we might be interested in the great scope and person of great capacity, these kind of initial teachings, they're forming the foundation, right? We mentioned yesterday, right? The Buddha enthused by great compassion, wishing for all sentient beings to be free from suffering and taking responsibility to do it ourselves alone. Well, then if we want to have that mind of great compassion, wishing that others would be free from suffering, we have to understand how beings are suffering, right? Then it can be more rich and profound. Otherwise, you know, we can get to all sorts of wrong views, like only the ones we see, right? And the ones we hear about, the ones that are very evident, right? Oh, people are suffering due to sickness, people are suffering due to war, all these. Okay, so yeah, all those, the people with economic problems, the people who are sick, the people who are poor, people who are in war-torn countries, we have compassion for them. But I don't know, the rich and famous, celebrities, all these, oh, they have the good life, right? Then our compassion doesn't extend actually to all sentient beings. Because actually, if we haven't abandoned the thought seeking the pleasurable, experiences in this life, we can almost say like, oh yeah, they have it all. No need to practice compassion to them, right? So therefore, next slide was just to actually repeat, but go to the one after that. Therefore, you'll see when you study Lamrim, there's this terminology: the paths shared with a small and medium scope. You seen that? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, do you want some audience participation? Yeah. Namgyal, putting you to the test. So can we differentiate? So what's the difference between a path shared with a small scope and the actual path of someone in the small scope? Or what is that talking about? Hmm? Okay, so no, that's true. Yeah, but I'm saying, okay, so let's just say path shared with someone in the small scope with a path of the small scope. Listen. Hmm? Okay. All right. All right. So let's first think of this, right? When we speak of small and medium scopes, we mean training the mind in the stages of the path shared with the small and medium scopes. We do not mean training the mind in the actual small and medium parts of the path. Okay. Very good. I mean that's true. So then what do we then say is the actual small scope practice versus when we say shared? So maybe we can make it clear like this. So who's doing the sharing, or why are we calling shared? Hmm? Namgyo? Sharing is caring, right? So who's doing the sharing? What's being shared? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So uh, I'll just elaborate a bit, but this is the main point, right? So we were saying, okay, let's take the example of meditating on impermanence and death or refuge. Refuge. Okay. So the person of medium scope, what is their goal? Freedom from samsara. Okay. All right. But they're still practicing going for refuge to the three jewels. Their motivation for doing that is freedom from samsara, right? Okay. Then we had someone in the small scope. They're also going for refuge. But what is their motivation? Good rebirth in the next life. So both the person of the true full-fledged small scope practitioner and the medium scope practitioner, they're both going for refuge. So the practice of going for refuge is shared between those two people, right? But the actual small scope path is to do it with a small scope motivation, just getting good rebirth in the next life. Okay. So what this is to say, and the import for us is all these practices that are talked about in the small scope, well, we're doing it, hopefully, with a medium scope or maybe great scope motivation, but we still have to do those practices. We still have to think about impermanence and death. We still have to think about, good karma. We have to think about refuge. We have to do all these things, but we're doing it with a different motivation, with the great scope motivation, but we still do it. It's not that we skip to, you know, page 700. Okay. Okay. Very good. You may. Oh, yeah. Okay. Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Everybody. Oh, right. So maybe I should say, so technically speaking, everybody who's not yet a Buddha has Buddha nature. Because remember, Buddha nature is the potential to become enlightened. So if you're already enlightened, you don't have that potential anymore. You've actualized your potential, right? That's the only caveat. But everyone else, yeah, has. Well, so that's the thing too, right? So the question was, do you have to go through the small scope in order to achieve the medium scope? So for us, a few slides ago, we talked about the actual measure of having generated the small scope, where we we view the concerns of this life as completely incidental, right? So it's not that we have to have the full-fledged realization before we can think about these things. Sorry to say, but we might not even get those full-fledged realizations in this life. So practically speaking, we go through the teachings from in order, and as His Holiness was saying, right, 57 times we go through. Every time we go through, hopefully we're getting more insight, more connection. It's affecting our mind on deeper level, right? But yeah, so we don't wait for the full-fledged realization. We go through it again and again and again. But it is said the benefit of teaching in that way is when you do it again and again, all the paths, more connections are being drawn within. And then especially, I mean, it even says when we've studied about bodhicitta, then we go back to precious human rebirth, it can become so much richer, right? Wow. This life is so precious because I can meditate on bodhicitta, right? And then going like that. Yeah. And then just one thing, because we have a experienced retreater here. They actually say in the text, rather, as you're going through the stages, rather than kind of going for that full realization, you get to a point where you think, ooh, if I continue to meditate on this for a little bit longer, I would get the full realization. Then you go to the next, right? There's some mental transformation. You get some confidence to say that, right? If you don't have confidence you can get the realization, that means it hasn't really touched the mind, hasn't moved the mind. But after you get that movement, boom, you can go on to the next. And then, yeah. Some people, they get the instructions from their Lama, go through the Lam Rim, and you'll get very specific instructions. Okay, small scope, you meditate 3 months. Medium scope, you meditate 6 months. Great scope, you meditate 7 months. Rinse and repeat. Do that 12 times. We'll talk later. Yeah. So I think it's like this. One is, and this is even for us, right? One is there's so much benefit into having the imprints of the whole path, right? So the first one is, if we were like, I must get the precious human rebirth realization before I go on to the next one, maybe we'll never get to even impermanence and death, much less bodhicitta, right? So one is, since death can come at any time, get the whole imprints of the path. And practically speaking, Lama Zopa Rinpoche is always saying for us to do like an entire Lam prayer, like foundation of all qualities, 3 principles of the path, so that at least we get some experience, even if it's a little, of the entire path. Okay. Now, for those ones, why is it said if you get some experience to not go for the full-fledged but continue? I'm a little bit speculating, but I think, you see, as it says in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, that, just like mm, the fire at the end of the eon, burns the whole kind of world system, right? So too, the mind of bodhicitta then can destroy all previously accumulated misdeeds. Okay. So especially the great scope practices, they're more powerful. Why don't we have any kind of realization? Well, we have karmic obscurations, right? So yes, we were talking about karma being the cause of, unfortunate rebirth and suffering in this life, but more fundamentally, they also block the mind from getting realizations. If you know the story of Lama Tsongkhapa, who's the author of Lamrim Chenmo, so so he was having visions of Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom, like visions, like you can see you and me, like in the sky, right? He sees the Buddha of wisdom, Manjushri, is able to ask questions. Okay? That's how advanced he was on the path. He asked Manjushri, hey, is my level, again, I'm sorry, I'm paraphrasing. Hey, is my level of realization or my view of emptiness the same as Nagarjuna? Or same as Bhaviveka? And Manjushri says, no, no, actually. So sorry, those of you who don't know, Nagarjuna and Bhaviveka, they're two great Indian masters, or yeah, and they sort of were known as the kind of founders of these different tenet systems. So Lama Tsongkhapa's view at that time didn't fall into any of that. He was kind of in his in between. And so he asked Manjushri, well, how do I get there? How do I achieve the highest view? And he was given the very special, famous advice. So normally we would think, okay, how do you arrive at the view of Chandrakirti? Study Chandrakirti's text, right? Mm. He was given different advice. He was told to accumulate merits and purify previously accumulated negative actions. Make requests to your guru who you see as inseparable from the Buddha. Then study the text. So that's why, actually, in Tsongkhapa, he was in the middle of teaching to, 10,000 people, it says. He was in the middle of teaching and get this advice, and Manjushri told him, you know what? Yeah, forget this teaching. Just go off to the cave, do your retreat, purify your mind. So you can imagine, like, what? Are you sure? Tsongkhapa, the Buddha's there. Are you sure? Then, of course, Manjushri says, hey, of course I know what's most beneficial and not. You tell whatever these 10,000 people who've come, tell them sorry, but you're leaving tomorrow. Don't finish the teaching. Anyway, then it goes off. He does, we do the prostrations. He did 3.5 million prostrations, 1.8 million mandala offerings, all this to purify the mind. Then, the realization came. So anyway, sorry, roundabout way to answer your question, Romy, but my thought is, so even when we get that initial, like, oh, if I continue to meditate, I'll be able to realize, if we kind of continue on and do the practices, especially on bodhicitta, which brings so much purification, then actually it might come even quicker, right? It might come quicker than just continuing. So that's my thought on why that advice is given. We have till 12:30, right? Très bien. Okay, so next slide. So now we're getting into it. The person of medium capacity. Okay. So here, who is this person of medium capacity? They're a person. So this is the real textbook definition. A person posited from the point of view of one who, having become disgusted with all of samsaric existence, makes their goal to attain their own liberation from that, and thus engages in the method to attain it, the three higher trainings. And then Atisha, we saw, right? Those persons are called medium who stop sinful actions, turn their backs on the joys of psychic existence, and diligently strive just for their own peace. So since we have some budding Lamrim experts, let's look at this. Ngalang Pelden, his definition. So now my question to you, what is he talking about? A person posited from the point of view of one who. Why do we say that? Hmm? Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is true. I'm asking just that first phrase, a person posited from the point of view of one who, right? So let's put it this way. If we just had as a definition, forget a person posited from the point of view, and we just said one who, having become disgusted with all of samsaric existence, makes their goal to attain their own liberation from that, and thus engage in the method to attain it, three higher trainings. Can we use that as a definition? That's what I'm getting at. Anyone on the Zoom want to throw something out? Should we let that marinade? Well, it is a debate question, but this is the thing, right? We can have it, right? So this is the thing, right? We don't think, oh, that's just the debate. Oh, this is, we need to, also, okay. No one? Posited from the point of view who? So this is what we do in debate, right? We go through the text, and then even normally when we read, it's like, yeah, okay, I know all those words in that sentence. Okay, I'll go on, right? But when we debate, we might go through one page in a day, and then supposed to memorize it, and then I'll ask you for the definition, and then I'll ask you to really, okay, why are these words there in that definition? Do we need those words? If we don't need those words, why did Ngôn Peldon, waste ink, waste my time? Well, so then this is how we would say, right? If we remember the two things would be, we leave that first part out and we just have as a definition one who having been disgusted with all of samsaric existence, versus person positive from the point of view of. So now you're saying, well, if we leave out that first phrase and we just say one who having become disgusted with all of samsaric existence, is that a fleeting experience? But if we posit from the point of view of one, then it's not. So that is something, and we would investigate, right? So now if I were then to ask, no, one who having become disgusted with all of samsara existence, that's a real experience. It's not fleeting. So then if I were to qualify that by saying the real experience, and then, put that aside, then if we say one who having become disgusted with all of samsara existence, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, yeah. Well, you're on the right track, but small scope and medium scope, do they share that? Really? Small scope. But you're on the right track. Yeah, but no. So no. We're all friends here. But you're on the right track, yeah. Um, okay. I hear what you're saying, but actually, Massimo, you're on the right track. You're thinking, well, and of course, there can be many interpretations, but the track I want to take is similar to what you started at. But instead of saying small and medium, what about small and great? So the great scope practitioner, aren't they disgusted with all of samsaric existence? Do they make their goal to attain their own liberation from that? Well, so here's a little debate. It is a goal. It is not their main goal. Okay, then do they engage in the method to attain that? Do they engage in 3 higher trainings? 3 higher trainings being training in concentration, ethical discipline, concentration, and wisdom. They do that, right? So the great scope practitioner discuss it with samsaric existence. Their goal to attain their own liberation. Okay, that is a goal, not their main one, and they engage in the method to attain it. But they're not posited from the point of view of one who does that. So positive from the point of view means like, this is their kind of the main one. And so we define them as that. They have that, but that's not their distinguishing characteristic. So they're not positive from the point of view. Okay. So because of that, to exclude the great scope practitioner, this is what we were talking about with the shared practices, right? So they have the shared contemplation. Those great scope practitioners, and this is why they even use the translation scope, right? Scope is like how big or small you're seeing. So, if your scope is just this, the medium scope practitioner sees everything that the small scope practitioner sees, but they see a bit more. And then the great scope practitioner sees everything the medium scope sees, but even more than that. Okay. So anyway, that's why. People on Zoom, have I lost you? You with me? Terrific. So yeah. Mm. Sorry, I just remembered. So one of my bosses, back when I worked in management consulting. Okay. Sorry. Okay. We had just this philosophical debate, right? So now we're gonna rest a couple minutes. I'm gonna share a story because this came to my mind. So, anyways, it's uh, just take the story at face value. So one of our colleagues, because so I was very junior. One of our colleagues had a problem with BO, body odor. Okay, and so we're there, with the clients, and then one of the colleagues, yeah, he kind of smelled bad. So then the thought was, well, should someone tell this person? If so, who should tell the person? And so at one point, they were trying to get me to tell. I'm the most junior on the team, but they were thinking, "Hey, but yeah, because you're young, you bit maybe you could say it in a nice way." But then finally, my boss said, "No, no, no. I'm gonna tell. That's why they pay me the big bucks." Okay. All right. So just thinking, right? Oh, this is a debate question. Well, Romy asked me to come and teach you this topic. So we're going to get into that. I mean, I'm not sure paying big bucks, but anyway, that's my job. That's my job to bring these points up, and then we answer. Okay. So yeah, maybe next slide. So then, how then we train the mind in the stages shared with the medium scope? We have to, one, develop the thoughts of yearning for liberation. We do that by thinking of the general sufferings of samsara and then the specific sufferings. And then we ascertain the nature of the path leading to liberation. Then thinking about the source of suffering, the entry to samsara, and then actually ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. Okay, that's how we do. Those are the outlines, by the way, of Liberation Palm Your Hand. Later, we'll get into the outlines from Lamrim Chenmo, which are a little bit more extensive than that. Okay. So here, we can already see, next slide, the Four Noble Truths, which we mentioned was the first teaching of the Buddha after he was enlightened, right? So, sorry, just go back to the previous slide. Thinking about the sufferings of samsara and then thinking about the source of suffering, right? You see those? So now, next slide. Those are the first of the two of the Four Noble Truths. Okay. Mm. So then at this point, when these topics are introduced, in most of the Lamrim texts, you'll see this debate come up. So what's the debate that comes up? They say, hey, wait a minute. Cause comes first and then comes the effect, right? So now the Buddha, he taught suffering first and then the cause. Why is he messing up the order? Why do you teach it like that? Right? Remember this? Yeah? Yeah. So most of the Lamrim texts, they will bring up this qualm and then they'll answer it. Okay. So what's the point? What's the point of talking about suffering first and then the cause of suffering? That is true. That is true. Yes. Mm, right. So here, actually, the next stanza by Maitreya gives a little bit more insight, right? So here, there's a kind of medical analogy, right? Recognize you are ill, eliminate the cause of illness, attain health, rely on a remedy. Likewise, you should recognize, eliminate, attain, and rely upon suffering, its cause, cessation, and the path, respectively, right? So, when you go into the doctor, right? They don't just say, "Okay, we're going to cut you open," right? First, there's the explanation. They run the tests. They then determine your illness, and then determining, okay, well, does this illness have, a cause, or what is the cause? Is that cause, able to be cured? Okay, we can cure it, and this is how we do it, right? So similarly, um, have to first recognize that we're sick, then go into the cause and all that. But even on a more, real practical level for us, you see, we have such strong clinging to this notion that there is true happiness to be found within samsara, right? Remember when we were still the chiropa, right? Then saying or thinking that, oh, I'm suffering because I'm lonely. I'm suffering because I'm in debt. I'm suffering because, you know, these government policies, whatever it is, we're completely putting the blame on the outside. And we think, oh, if only I were to blank. If that, what we're filling in the blank, is another experience within samsara, that's not the lasting happiness. So to teach these levels of suffering, kind of big and small, that's going to counteract our, as it says in the Guru Puja, please bless me to overcome the mind that sees this endless ocean of samsara as a pleasure grove, right? We have a distorted view that views what's actually suffering in nature as being a source of happiness. So that's the other practical reason why Buddha taught the truth of suffering first. Okay? So next. So identifying this mind yearning for liberation. So liberation means freedom from bondage, and what binds you to psychic existence is karma and afflictions. Freedom from rebirth impelled by karma and afflictions is liberation, and the desire to obtain that freedom is the mind intent on liberation. Okay. So this is interesting. Someone mentioned this last night. Um, I think it was someone on the Zoom. They said they always want to practice, furthering the three principles of the path. Yeah, yeah. I think someone said that. So normally these three principles of the path, they translate it as renunciation, right? Bodhicitta and the right view. So here in Lamrim Chenmo, they've translated that as the mind yearning for liberation, rather than saying renunciation. Okay. Well, am I? Someone had that, right? Okay. Hmm. So this is always, I like to go into this. The word in Tibetan. So many Tibetan lessons for you guys. Okay, you taking notes? So the word then, nejung, nejung. So nge means definite. Jung means to emerge. Okay. So means, right, we have to have this thought. I definitely have to get out of this samsaric state. Right. Now, whatever translators first were working and they chose that word renunciation, okay, no throwing shade on them, but see, it gives a little bit different connotation, right? We have renunciation like, what can it mean, right? I renounce donuts and sugar and caffeine and coffee, alcohol, right? We're renouncing these things, but it's like we really like them. We really like it, but I'm going to give it up for Lent, right? I'm going to give it up for Lent. So before, Fat Tuesday, right? We eat all the things we want, Carnival, Mardi Gras, all that stuff. Okay. Now for 40 days, I can give that up, right? But there's still some attraction there, right? We like those things. So here, it's a bit different, right? We come to see, actually, we don't like these things at all, right? They do us no good. And therefore, this thought, I have to get out. I yearn for liberation. I yearn for freedom. Different way it appears to the mind, right? So, in order to get that, then we need to see, like this is saying here, right? Liberation means freedom from bondage. We have to understand the fact that we're, bound. We're in prison. We want freedom. Then we have to see what's sort of binding us. And then seeing, until we have that freedom, there's no real happiness. Then we want to be free. So that's the mind we have to get. All right. I thought so. I thought so. Thank you, Anna. See, and I'm not just saying I thought so, like I told you so. But then I thought, if it wasn't her and I just say, then I put her in a very uncomfortable position. Because what is she going to say? No, I don't want to practice by the three principles. Okay. Anyway, so next slide, please. So here we have Lama Tsongkhapa and three principles of the path, right? This is the reason to develop that mind. Without the complete intention, definitely to be free from circling. So this is it, right? Definitely to be free. That's nejung. Okay. There's no way to pacify attachment seeking pleasurable effects in the ocean of circling. Also, by craving for psychic existence, embodied beings are continuously bound. Therefore, at the beginning, seek renunciation. Right. So there are these two reasons. Right. So the first one, we were saying when Massimo was, hazarded the guess, oh, is it the shared between small scope and middle scope, right? So actually, the small scope practitioner, though they have a type of wish to be free from the suffering of the lower realms, they have as their goal a good rebirth, but that good rebirth is still within samsara. So they are still seeking pleasurable effects within the ocean of circling, with means samsara. So here, ocean of circling, see in Tibetan, Korawa. Korawa is how they translate that word samsara. And you might know korlo is wheel. So it means like circling, right? No? Cyclic existence. So ocean of circling means samsara. So these ones in the small scope, by wanting a good rebirth in their future life, it's still within samsara. So by craving for cyclic existence means even to crave a good rebirth in their next life, then we're still bound within samsara. So we not only have to have the kind of to reshape our goal to want to be free from the suffering of lower realms, but be free from samsara altogether. So as long as we have that craving for cyclic existence in any way, even to get good rebirth, then we continually bind ourselves. Okay, I'll say that in a couple minutes. All right. So some more reasons. The next slide. So Arya Deva says, how can one who is not disenchanted with this world appreciate peace? Cyclic existence like home is difficult to leave behind. Okay. So therefore, disenchanted. I like that word, right? This world means samsara. So since we have that mind that views samsara as something good, or maybe there is something ultimately good within samsara, we just have to get the promotion, get the girl, get the whatever, fill in the blank. So until we become disenchanted and see that, oh, actually, there's nothing here that's going to bring the lasting peace that I seek, then appreciate peace, nirvana, right? And to appreciate means set that as our goal. Because, well, it's kind of like that, right? Like home. Samsara has been our home. We don't know anything else. We've actually never experienced anything but samsara, fundamentally. Then those whose minds are attached to cyclic existence will continue to wander there constantly. So that's why, further reasons, we were talking why the Buddha taught the truth of suffering first. We need to become disenchanted. We need to stop, overcome the attachment to cyclic existence. Okay. I love this next slide. Yeah. Sri Jagan Mitrananda. Although we have sunk into the midst of cyclic existence, an ocean of suffering with neither bottom nor shore, we are not disenchanted. We have no fear. We are pleased and excited. What is going on in our minds? Although we have entered a fire constantly blazing with problems, poverty, hardship in acquiring food and shelter, effort in keeping, and finally loss, as well as separation, illness, and aging. We boast of happiness. This seems insane. Hmm? A very wise man. Who is he? Very wise. So, ooh, 13 more minutes. Okay. So I wanted to let's just appreciate that. Let's sink in. And I wanted to say this too, Mm. How we engage with the teachings, right? So normally they talk about the three types of wisdom. And we have the wisdom from listening, wisdom from contemplating, and the wisdom from meditation. Okay. So now when you're attending the lecture or you might be reading, so there is some wisdom that comes, right? But what we have to do is then contemplate. And I was using this, talking about this last night, using what we see in the teachings as a hypothesis and try to apply to our own life. Okay. Okay. And then, you know, I've already told a few stories from my life, but the point is, all of you, you need to find those stories in your life. You know, I told about that, when I was in Amsterdam and couldn't sleep after breaking up, right? What is the story from you where that you get that little, that's what the Buddha meant. Oh, that's what Nagarjuna meant. So let's check. Here's something. You check on Monday. Some of you go back to work, right? Then your colleague, oh hey, how was your weekend? How was your weekend? Okay, so maybe not this Monday, but last week, or maybe you went had a holidays. How was your weekend? Oh, how was your holidays? Then what do we say? What do we say? Oh, I had a great weekend. I had a great weekend. Oh yeah. I went on a hike on Saturday. Then on Sunday, I went to this amazing concert. Then on Sunday, I found this cute little brunch place, you know, or whatever, right? Or it was a bad weekend. You know what happened? I had a horrible weekend. On Friday night, my boss told me that the system went down. I had to work all weekend to get it up online again. Or, that this person I was, seeing, they broke up with me, or whatever it is, right? What do we tell people on Monday when they ask, did we have a good weekend or did we have a good holiday? Hmm? Not you, Namjong, right? What do we say? Is it like that? Hmm. I mean, do any of us say, how's your weekend? You know, I was waiting in line at the grocery store and someone cut in front of me. But instead of getting angry, I practiced patience. It was a great weekend. I don't know. What do you think? So this is what we're saying, right? We're pleased and excited. Yay. I had some samsaric pleasure. I had a great weekend. So all of this, it was just kind of prefacing a little bit, right? Because now we're going to jump in to the various sufferings in samsara. So oftentimes, right? Especially in beginner courses. People are like, oh, Buddhism's so pessimistic. Always talking about suffering, right? And later we're going to get into 6 types of suffering, 8 types of suffering, 3 types of suffering, 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 suffering. You know, why is the Buddha, you know, do people talk like this? You guys killing my buzz? They used to talk like that 20 years ago when I was cool. Why is the Buddha killing my buzz? Just, just, just let me enjoy the sunset. Don't tell me it's suffering, right? So this is the point. The Buddha's not trying to kill our buzz, but the Buddha's trying to sort of redirect our minds. So yeah, kind of like this in the small scope, in the small capacity being. What do we do in general? We have to reflect on the our choices, our options. So we have suffering of the lower realms versus a good rebirth. Then between those two, we see the faults of one and the advantages of the other, and then we choose the the one that's more advantageous. So similarly, in the middle scope now, we have to see these. What are the choices we have here? We have more suffering in samsara, or we have liberation. Then we have to see the faults of the one, so we can turn our attention to the other. So that's why we talk about all this kind of suffering. So maybe next slide, and then we have the lunch break. So here, the general sufferings of samsara, this is the 6 types. So here again, these are the way it's translated in Liberation of the Palm of Your Hand. The bane of uncertainty. I hardly ever use that word, but here it is. So we can think in other ways like the suffering or the drawback of. So here, when we talk about uncertainty, means no kind of stable place, right? Everything's in constant flux. And how does that uh, pan out in unsatisfactory experiences? Maybe it's good to say this actually now. See, suffering or dungel, dukkha, dukkha. You see, in English, it has a quite connotation of like, oh, I'm suffering, like physical, mental pain. But maybe in a kind of broader way, we can think of it as even like unsatisfactory. Something not quite right. A little bit of a bummer. It doesn't have to be like a toothache or, being dumped or something like this. So even the fact that, we might attain a good position or some kind of happiness, the fact that it will end inevitably, that itself means could be better. That means unsatisfactory in some way. Okay? Then the suffering of being dissatisfied, right? Here, even, we get something. Okay. Most of the time, we make a lot of effort and we don't get what we want, right? But even those times we do get what we think we wanted, we're still left dissatisfied. So normally, they say the person, you're in debt, you want to get out of debt. Okay, you get out of debt, then you're still not satisfied. Then you want down payment for your house. Then you want your second house. Then it just keeps going. Dissatisfied. Then the suffering of repeatedly leaving bodies. Then the flip side, being conceived and born over and over again. So here, mm, there's some very graphic imagery in Nagarjuna's letter to a friend, where he has us imagine all the bones from the skeletons we would have had from all the rebirths we've taken. And they, if you stack up all those bones, it would reach higher than Mount Meru, this kind of Mount Sumeru. Anyway, the point for us, they say, when you think about beginningless time till the present, we've had one kind of suffering or another. And then perhaps even worse, if we don't achieve liberation, then our future rebirths will be even more than that. Mm. Then the bane of moving from high to low over and over again, and the bane of having no companions. So there, of course, we do have companions in this life. I hope we all are, good to each other. But from life to life, yeah. I mean, we'll die and we'll go into the next life alone. We have no one kind of stable that will always be with us as a help and support. So anyway, our time is up, and we're going to get into the different lists of these sufferings in the afternoon. But for now, here's when you can contemplate in the time, in the break time, right? And think of the uncertainty. So how has that shown up in your life? What kind of dissatisfaction have you had? Well, those are hasty. Those we can see. We don't have to take on any views of past and future lives. Of course, if you have some insight into that, that can also be good. But the point is, right, part of the reason they give the 6, 8, 3, all these different lists is, right, what's the big picture? We need to generate this thought, yearning for liberation. So we need to see the faults of samsara. So what of these lists of the various faults of samsara hit you the most? Make you say, yeah, that's so true. I remember that. Then those are the ones you contemplate and have a more effect on the mind. Okay? So, lunchtime, we have a 2-hour break. So those of you in different time zones, maybe it's another kind of time. But yeah, get nourished, rest, but also maybe think about this a little bit. Which of this list kind of hits you the most? Okay. Okay. Enjoy your lunch. Is there anything to be enjoyed in samsara? No. So we can, in the worldly sense, enjoy your lunch. But no, yeah, we'll be hungry again in a few hours. That's the nature of samsara, right? So even knowing that, we still eat lunch, right? Right. So that's why, this thought of renunciation, it's not that, oh, lunch, that's samsara. I renounce that. But it's more, knowing the truth about it, right? Okay. Thank you.